Without Bitcoin, and so it's true. I mean, without Bitcoin, I'm not sure I'd even be here talking to you guys, really. Because what else can you grasp if you fully, what else can you grasp onto that's solid, that you know is the foundation? Right now, there's nothing in the world like that except Bitcoin. And that's why people are running around with their heads in the clouds, because they don't know what's going on and they can't grasp onto anything solid.
Hey, everybody. This is the High Hash Rate Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Dan.
And this podcast is just two plebs getting high and talking about Bitcoin, life, and the absurdity of the fiat world. Our guests don't necessarily get high with us, and you don't have to either.
But it helps. Welcome back to High Hash Rate. Today we're talking to Jeff. Jeff is the co-founder of massadoption.net. You know him on Twitter as msbitcoinlife.com. I've been trying to connect. We've been trying to connect with you for a couple months now. You were recommended by Phil, who I think is associated with Mass Adoption. You guys might know him as Need Creations on Twitter. He's pretty active there. But so he recommended you. We reached out a few months ago, and we finally got this episode scheduled. But so excited to talk to you, Jeff. How you doing?
Great, and thanks. And I have to shout out to Phil, who referred me to you guys. He's a big part of our team at Mass Adoption, so I appreciate him.
Awesome. So let's kind of dig into your background and kind of who you are. Like, what are you doing these days, and how did you get to where you are at today, and your Bitcoin journey or your orange pill story? Kind of start wherever you think is most relevant.
I'll try to make it quick because I'm 60 years old, so it could be a long story, but I'll try to make it quick. I've been an entrepreneur, building businesses for the past 35 years, private equity-backed, venture capital-backed businesses. And then in 2020, I was on my third business, and COVID hit, and all these mandates and all these rules and regulations, I had to shut my businesses down. I just got home and said, I'm done. I'm closing my businesses because I can't take this. And that was before I was orange pilled and before I knew I was a libertarian and sovereignty and all that stuff. But I guess it's in me. So I closed my business down. I went from working 7 days a week to no days a week, like most people. And it allowed me to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. So I just spent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For now, it's years of just learning, understanding, researching Bitcoin.
A lot of our a lot of our listeners, including myself, even though I had a little Bitcoin before 2020, it really wasn't until 2020, the COVID lockdowns, the stimulus, just all the clown world stuff that really kicked off 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, which really orange pilled me. And so I guess you mentioned that you were an entrepreneur, you worked in private equity, and COVID caused you to shut down your third business. What kind of businesses were you involved in that you were investing in? Were these like technology companies, things like that, financial companies?
No, that's way too generous of you to think that's my level. I was a down and dirty brick and mortar entrepreneur. I had retail locations. I built my first company to 40 locations throughout the U.S. I sold that. And then I did the same thing in Canada, mostly Toronto. We had 18 locations. So it basically brick and mortar stores. I had vintage clothing stores and sort of hype sneakers and hype merchandise. That was my business. So it was exciting. It was great to be in. It kept me young, right in the action. But
it sounds like a lot of hard work.
Every inch of progress was real work. So, It was hard, but we did it.
I mentioned that because it's like, there's I brought up technology, financial companies. Most of what a lot of people, especially on Twitter or wherever, they think about these types of companies, these private equity or public companies. They think of, SaaS companies, technology companies, financial companies. And these things get like massive amounts of funding. They have their stock prices run up because interest rates have been so low, so they don't have to turn a profit. They don't have to show revenue, anything like that for years, right? But like to open a brick and mortar company, right? You've got to lease that property. You got to start turning out revenue, selling products. Like, what is the time scale like when you start one of these companies before you start seeing some sort of traction before you have to pull the plug? Because I feel like the feedback loop is much shorter in these situations.
That's a great point. And I didn't realize this until now, but what you just talked about is the financialization of our economy and the crazy multiples. It's only because of free money and low interest rates. I did it, and I did it from 1990. I hate to date myself, but 1990 all the way up to 2020. And so back in that day, when I met with my initial private equity group that initially funded my endeavor, once I had it running, it's all about, at that point, it's completely different than most companies today. It's all about financial statements, cash flow, capital expenditures, debt to equity rate, like all the things that you learn about in business school actually happened. It seems to me that's gone out the door. And that's one of the reasons, that's not specific, but that's why I stopped doing business. I'm like, this is a world, I don't even understand how it's even surviving, but it is. And I kind of learned more about how it is surviving. But I wanted to know part of that sort of, but when my employees were making more money, not working, they're making over $1,000 a week. And I'm like, guys, we got a business. Like, we got a great business. Like, let's get back to work. And, 25-year-old kids making $1,000 a week. They're sitting home, hanging on the couch, playing video games and having fun. They're not coming into work. So at that point, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I couldn't figure it out. But I'm like, something in my gut is telling me, and I have multiple sclerosis. I don't walk well. So I'm like, I can't physically do this. If it just didn't feel right to me. And I'm so happy I made that decision, but I closed my business in less than 24 hours. I told my crew, I apologized that we're closing, but that's what we did because the rules had been changed and I didn't know that. No one told me the rules changed.
Right. Like you hear lots of anecdotes and stories about companies that suffered from the lockdowns and, just from the incentive switch that the government kind of flipped, in March of 2020. But you being somebody in the industry, I mean, I'm sure you knew multiple other brick and mortar companies, entrepreneurs running these companies. How many just from your perspective in your world, did you see, fail or just, a company, somebody that spent their blood, sweat and tears building, and they just get rug pulled like a Celsius or a BlockFi customer, overnight, essentially?
So, I read a great book on this. I think it's an intentional, I don't want to start conspiracy discussions here, but
this is the place to do it, Jeff. This is the place to do it.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the entree. The goal, I couldn't be in business and sell my sneakers, but Foot Locker could be open. Like, why couldn't the local hardware store be open, but, Ace True Value or Target can be open? And so that didn't make any sense to me. And like, basically, I realized they're trying to crush small businesses. I mean, they're trying to, because how can you control, a million small businesses? You can't. But you can control an Amazon, a Target,
Home Depot,
and the big retail, Home Depot, Lowe's, right? So I didn't realize that was the plan back then, but that's kind of the plan, and it's worked. I mean, I look at small businesses today, and between inflation, meaning the cost of their goods, and all the debt that the customers are in, I don't understand how they can even stay in business. I find it very
right. And the people, like some of
the
larger companies, the corporates that you mentioned, right? Like they're a lot easier to extort and control through the cost of capital. So like, these smaller businesses, right? They go to the local credit union, the local bank. It's harder to, like you said, to control these individual small businesses, but they can go through their banking partners, right, so to speak, and basically tell Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, all these massive companies, like, you're priced out of the debt market if you don't comply with kind of the regulations that we've decided we want to push to get through this COVID crisis.
Right.
Did you have to? Did you receive some sort of letter or something making you close your businesses?
Or did you read it in the newspaper like somebody getting traded from the Dodgers?
Well, I'm in Boston, and my stores were on Newbury Street, which is the fashion shopping street in Boston. And so that's where there were protests there and riots there, and all. It seems like years ago, but it was only a couple of years ago. And 50% of the stores on Newbury Street, which is like Fifth Avenue in New York, it's like the fancy street in Boston to go shopping. Rents are $150 a square foot minimum. Now they're more, but so it's a very expensive place to do business. 50% of the stores, the windows were broken. They were all boarded up because there were riots. So if we think all the way back, that actually happened in Boston. I'm not sure where you guys are located or if it happened in your cities. But so I didn't need the state to tell me anything. I mean, I'm like, all right, half the stores are boarded up. I get guys with gun owners, which I'm a big Second Amendment guy, so I'm not saying anything big, but they're sitting there with guns trying to protect their property. And I'm like, what am I doing? So it wasn't, but also my employees were we have to stay 6 feet apart. No, we have to wear masks. And I was totally against that. And I couldn't go against my employees. I needed them to work.
Right. Their incentives were suddenly misaligned from yours. They had all the incentive to stay home, to social distance, to basically behave in a way the government's telling them they should behave. The media is telling them they should behave, but which is out of, it's not aligned with the incentives of running a business, of running it profitably, of surviving. And like you talked about the riots. I mean, I don't know. It's probably different in each community, but I'm assuming there was no recourse from the local government, from the federal government, if you experience damage, right? People always say, oh, they have insurance, right? But then that is included in this inflation number where your insurance premiums are rising because you live in an area that, the state mafia has sent its goons to intimidate you if you don't have the right sign in your window, or you were open during COVID. Like just anything, like your costs are just going up, and everything's going up.
1,000% right. And I guess my gut told me that, this is only going to get worse. And if you don't like it today, you're not going to like it in 2 years or 3 years. And it was one of the best calls I ever made because it allowed me the time to, research and understand Bitcoin. And I got, I'm late to the game in 2020, but if you guys remember back in March of 2020, this was brand new to me. But Bitcoin went down to $3,000 or around 3,000. And I didn't know if that was good or bad. I mean, I could see the charts, but I'm like, all right. So I started buying in at 3,000. So, I closed my business down after working 35 years. I started researching Bitcoin. I'm not even sure how or why. Every time I turn a page, I read, Saifedean's book, Bitcoin State. I read every Bitcoin book that I can get my hands on. And every time I read something, I'm like, oh my God, this actually makes more sense than I thought yesterday. And every day my conviction just grew and grew and grew and grew. And then, so I was investing a little bit, a little slowly because I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing, which you never know. You're never confident that you know what you're doing. But you have to get to a certain level. But that summer, Michael Saylor, this is the real story. So I started at $3,000 in March, just doing hundreds, putting in, just seeing how it was growing. Oh my God. But when Saylor went in, he put in $250 million, I think in August of that year. And I watched a lot of Saylor, on YouTube. And I'm like, wait a minute. For the first time, not the first time, for one of the times in my life, I'm going to say, wait a minute, this guy is 1,000,000 times smarter than you will ever be. He's an MIT astronomical engineer. I mean, he's a genius. He's the longest standing tech company CEO. I mean, he's literally a genius, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion. And I said, if he's putting in $250 million into this thing, I'm all in. And from that day in, I have a family. I didn't tell my family I'm all in, which includes my wife. Just joking, everyone. But I went all in once Saylor put the $250 million.
That up to that point, right? So I just want to maybe parse out your psychology a little bit here, because when January of 2020, New Year's rings in, which we're about to do for 2024 now. I can't believe it's already been 4 years. But you have your business, your third business. You're presuming that this is going to go well, like presumably the first two did, and then you lose all that a few months later, and so you're kind of going from this investing in businesses. I don't know if you own stocks or how you invested the rest of your money before this, but
it was equity
okay,
based.
equity based. I found this new thing called Bitcoin. I'm reading and learning about it more every day. What was the anxiety level? You have the anxiety of everything else in life, but now you're moving slowly moving some of which would be all of your savings pretty much within a few months from here into this very speculative new technology that you're just learning about. How, nervous were you, or was the conviction growing so fast?
Dan, I'm so happy you brought the emotional side up of this, because that's even more important to me than the financial side. So I worked, and I'm not exaggerating, I worked 7 days a week, unless my wife made me not work, but 7 days a week for 30 something years. I also enjoyed it. It was my life. It was my personality. It was my everything. So, and I say 7 days a week, I mean 7 days a week. So I went from that for over 30 years to having zero to do. Plus, I'm handicapped. I used to run marathons. I can't walk without a walker. So it's been tough. And so I use my businesses to keep me energized. But when I close my business down and I can't exercise the way I want and get that adrenaline rush that I like, I was in a very bad place. I mean, a really bad place. Like, what's this all about? I'm not sure how long I want to hang around anymore. And I'd never been low in my life. I'd never been that low ever. It was very scary. And so Bitcoin, watching it go from 3,000 to 10th or whatever it went to, is great. But if you don't feel good mentally, the money doesn't mean a thing. So Bitcoin, besides increasing my wealth, it saved me and brought me back, helped me have a beacon of hope or of faith that things can get better, even though I don't understand what's going on. But without Bitcoin, and so it's true. I mean, without Bitcoin, I'm not sure I'd even be here talking to you guys, really. Because what else can you grasp what else can you grasp onto that's solid, that is the foundation? Right now, there's nothing in the world like that except Bitcoin. And that's why people are running around with their heads in the clouds, because they don't know what's going on and they can't grasp onto anything solid. And they're just trying to survive. And that's terrible. That's why I'm grateful to Bitcoin.
Before we get too far away from your backstory and your orange pilling story, you mentioned that you have multiple sclerosis. Can you talk a little bit more about when you got that diagnosis and kind of what how that's impacted your life and the prognosis? Because I don't know too much about it. I know a little bit about ALS, which is for lack of a better term, a different type of sclerosis that took Hal Finney, one of the first Bitcoiners. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, ALS is basically people get 5 year, they have 5 year lifespan when you get diagnosed, basically. MS is similar to ALS as far as what happens, but it just could take 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Everybody's different. But I got diagnosed when I was in my early 20s. My dad had MS, so it's in my family. So early 20s, I walked out of the parking lot because I had seen my dad suffer, and I got diagnosed. I woke up one morning, from my waist down was completely numb. I couldn't feel it. I'm like, well, what the hell's this? And we went to the doctor and we got the diagnosis. So that first day, I remember saying to my parents, I'm going to kill myself, because I was active and, teenage kid. And, but I got beyond that. And after that, I made a decision, what type of life I want to live. And I decided just to kind of go as hard as I could and push as much as I could. And and take the positive side of things and see what would come out of life. And so after I got diagnosed, I, ran marathons and snowboarded as much as I could and built a couple businesses. So it's affected me emotionally as far as my character, as far as challenges to me are just that, just challenges. They're not problems. And you become stronger once you get through to the other side. So, COVID was a big challenge for me.
Right, sure.
That was hard to get.
Before we transition on to kind of what you're working on and what you're involved with today, from our discussion so far, it sounds like Bitcoin was a very transformative, had a very transformative impact on your life due to, the external circumstances and how you found it. But you mentioned also, like, you work literally 7 days a week. You started and built 3 companies. That's, like you alluded to, a lot of movement, a lot of, you're staying busy. Your mind is just, not to say distracted, but it's focused. And then all of a sudden that comes to a screeching halt, and you kind of replaced some of this curiosity, some of this drive with learning about Bitcoin. But what about your journey with Bitcoin, or how has it, and the time that you had to, like, stop moving and just start, I don't know, being in this new circumstance? What did you learn about yourself through learning about Bitcoin and kind of finding this community?
Wow.
Because you mentioned, you didn't know you were a libertarian, right? And then now you found out you're a libertarian.
I see.
You know what I mean? Like, exactly.
Yeah, I have a great group of friends, and they're all, pretty successful, and most of them are in the financial world, and so we talk about this stuff all the time, and then so I learned that out of my whole group of friends. Like, I'm the most hardcore libertarian in my whole group of friends, and I didn't even know that 3 years ago. But when I start talking about it with people, I'm the one that's way hardcore more than my friends. I guess when I look back at it, I guess the sovereignty or the independence or the permissionless. I've kind of lived my life permissionless, although I've abided by the laws. But I didn't, I went to business. I got a degree in accounting in business school. And I worked for a CPA firm for a couple of years. And I quit. And my parents were shocked. And I said, I would rather wait tables than work in the CPA firm, than work in a cubicle in an office all day. So I basically realized I don't like, to ask permission or be told what to do. And it started very early on. And I think it's progressed to being a libertarian, saying, we want freedom of speech. We want hard money. We want the Second Amendment, all these type of things. So I guess early on the seeds were planted, and and I've just grown to figure out that's really who I am.
Other than the permissionless, when you mentioned you were reading more about Bitcoin every day, and you're like, this is more legit than I realized yesterday. What were some other aspects about it, maybe the technology, the difficulty adjustment, that really caught your attention and sent you deeper down the rabbit hole and built your conviction?
All those things you mentioned are icing on the cake. I mean, it has everything, but then you throw in the difficulty adjustment, right? You throw in the halving, like, oh my God, this is just genius on top of genius. I'm like, it's unbelievable. So that, but to fully understand that, you really have to go beyond reading about Bitcoin, in my opinion. I read history books. You need to learn a lot about psychology, history, the history of money, the history of empires. So it's not just about reading how Bitcoin works, because you won't appreciate it until you understand where it fits in and the importance of finding the hardest money ever known to mankind. So it's really, you got to read more than just Bitcoin books. You got to fully understand.
Sure.
That's why it takes a long time to fully understand this, because you really got to put it in context.
Yeah, you have to understand what proof of work really is, right? Like it's an algorithm that miners use with ASICs to find nonces. But what it really is it is that physical constraint tethered to the digital world, similar to gold, right? Like you need the miners, you need to the industrial capital to mine gold and to bring it to market, just like you need the industrial capital to mine Bitcoin and bring it to market. It's that constraint and it's really based on such simple, I don't want to say simple, but things that anybody in the world can reason about and understand. They can reason about the laws of physics, the properties that the Bitcoin protocol is built upon. It doesn't matter where you're at in time and space. If you can reason about how this works with the technology and resources available to you at your time or place.
I completely agree with you. I mean, and it's very important.
Right. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was actually curious if, as you're making that pivot from having no businesses into Bitcoin, how are you starting to look at business through a Bitcoin lens?
So, at first I thought, well, I have all my fancy, wealth manager friends, and they're all doing all this stuff to try to earn 7%. And this is initially like, well, I'm just going to hold Bitcoin. And they wanted nothing to do with Bitcoin. So that was initially what I thought. But then we created mass adoption, although it's become a business. I guess that's just because what I've done my whole life. So that's one. I mean, first of all, obviously the technical part about the peer-to-peer, all that stuff for business is unbelievable. The Lightning Network's unbelievable if you're talking like Bitcoin technology.
And could you just refresh us all on what mass adoption is, by the way?
Yeah, and let me piggyback on that question and say, at what point in your Bitcoin journey did you decide to start building again, and where this, initially started, this movement to start building mass adoption in just your local community?
Right. Well, I didn't think I was going to get another job. I'm 60 and I'm disabled. And I'm like, I don't need to have another job. But so I ended up tweeting with a couple of guys that are local, and I know I threw a meetup at a country club in an affluent neighborhood in this area, and my partner I did it with, we videotaped and put on YouTube, and the original founder of he was the founder of the meetup group. He saw the video and he tweeted at me and said, "Dude, how could you have a meetup and not invite me?" And so anyways, we met for coffee, and ever since then, we thought the exact same thing, and we had the exact same priorities and visions. And I'm like, wait, I built businesses. I've taken one unit, made it 40 units. I could do this. Let's build mass adoption. So we went from 3 or 4 people in our first meetup, and we teamed up as partners. And, within 12 months, we had a Freedom Festival in Boston. And we've been lucky enough to have some great speakers. So we had Jason Lowry talk at one of our mass adoption events, which was amazing. We've had Luke Broyles talk, Greg Foss, Larry Lepard, David Foley, BJ Dichter, Jason Mayer. So we've had a lot of great Bitcoin people speak at our meetups, and that's helped catapult us, to keep growing, because we've had great support from the community.
How did you connect with some of these people and get them to, come out and support your cause?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the first meetup I did was with a guy I met. I met his wife on Twitter, and I knew she was local. And we started. She tweeted at me and said, "I like your tweets." And we started DMing each other. And I started going into Bitcoin. She's like, "Oh, you got to be my husband." I'm like, "Well, who's your husband?" So I started tweeting with him. He ends up from the next town over. He's an ex BlackRock fund manager. I'm like, holy shit, you just connected me with this guy that's a Bitcoiner and that's BlackRock guy. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So he comes over for lunch. We hit it off. And he has a Bitcoin business, like an advisory. So he wanted to create something like, well, let's do like a high net worth sort of informational session he belongs to this club. So we did it. But so he was the one that got the original. He got Foss, Larry Lepard, and a guy from Unchained, I forget, and Brian Estes was supposed to come, who was another very, very smart guy. So he got these guys into the room, which I was amazed at. I didn't really know how big, how influential those guys were, because it was early on in my career. And we videotaped it. I was smart enough to do that. So we put it on YouTube, and that's kind of been the beginning. So it was serendipitous. It was luck, pure luck.
What is mass adoption? What are some of the events, or what are some of the things that you put on, and how to drive this mass adoption? Can you talk about how did you have Freedom Fest last year? Was that the first year?
We have a monthly meetup every month, and every once a quarter we have a speaker series. So like I talked about with that Foss, Lepard, Jason Lowry, those were our speaker series. So once a quarter we have a speaker series. We get hundreds of people at those, so it's good. And then I said to my partner, I said, look, I've always been involved in the vintage clothing business and sort of like the flea market business. So I'm like, well, why don't we just throw a festival? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, let's throw a festival, a Bitcoin festival, and show people that you can, have a circular economy and buy your food in Bitcoin and buy your T-shirt in Bitcoin. So he thought, I eventually talked him into it. He thought it was a little crazy. Hold on, excuse me, guys. Sorry. He thought it was a little crazy, but we ended
Jeff
up...
just ripped one. That's what he did.
No. And also, at one of our meetups, we're sitting around... we're sitting around having lunch with the 4 or 5 guys that go to the meetups. And we start talking about growing mass adoption. And I'm like, well, what do you do in the real world? I went around the table. First guy goes, oh, I'm a computer scientist. I'm a large language model guy. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I go to the next guy. Well, what do you do? He's like, I work in the energy business side. I work for an energy company that does all this stuff. I'm like, oh, energy. Okay, that's great. Then I go to the next person. I go, what do you do? So I'm a videographer. I'm like, oh my God, that's great. And then so I said, guys, we have a team right here. We just went around the table. And another guy, oh, I'm a writer. I'm like, oh, he actually writes, one of our guys writes for Bitcoin Magazine and a few other things. And so around the table, we had the team to build mass adoption. And that's how it actually started, from the meetups into like a real business, because we sat around going, oh my God, we have all the skill set here. So that is how it started. I think I didn't answer your question, but that was...
No, it is. Answer. It's almost like Avengers. I'm assembling a team, and everybody had all the perfect aligning skills. When I look at some of the branding and the graphics for mass adoption BTC, it's very reminiscent of the revolution, the American Revolution, and like kind of the Freedom Fest, which is kind of, I guess, goes along hand in hand with Bitcoin. But I just wanted to ask your opinion on this, because we've talked about this on the podcast with others, but do you see a similarity between kind of the old pub debates, the old tavern debates that kind of preceded the Industrial Revolution?
All the time.
Yeah.
We talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And so, naturally us being in Boston, where the Tea Party occurred and a lot of the histories occurred, for the revolution and for freedom. That's one reason why we did the festival last year, because there's no more perfect city to do a freedom festival in than Boston. So being in Boston has been very important. We wouldn't have started this in any other state.
Is that because it ties to the revolution, you're saying?
Yeah, and we talk about all the time when we're like on the regular monthly meetups and we're having a couple of drinks. Oh, this is what they. I forget exactly the exact terminology we use, but this is what they were doing 200 years ago in the pubs. Talking about the resistance and whatever. Like, yeah, and we totally feel like
circulating
that. I'm sure a lot of people
circulating white papers and treatises.
Exactly. Yeah. So we feel it. I mean, I think probably a lot of people do, but especially being in Boston.
Have you been, just to shift gears, have you been able to connect your vintage clothing background to Bitcoin? Or if you haven't, question. Why haven't you? Come on.
I'm trying. Because we also used to make a lot of T-shirts, so I'm like, okay, that I can do like a vintage fashion T-shirt with Bitcoin, but otherwise, the connections are, the merchant adoption. So mass adoption, we were trying to really work on merchant adoption because I know merchant services very well, and I've just found it very challenging. We've had a couple partners, and the retailers are not really ready for it, the people that we've talked to, and there's no great business case to be made to get into the business of having merchants adopt, as far as not trying to rent seek, but try to make it a business. So we couldn't figure that out either. So I don't know any direct correlation. Do you know of one?
No, I'm just thinking about,
or what do you think?
I'm thinking about these, like, all these images of like vintage clothing come to mind, and then just slapping Bitcoin memes on top of it, or trying to integrate some sort of Bitcoin story around this vintage clothing. That's what I was thinking of.
Something there. I just don't have the answer.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, that's one way to spread the Bitcoin message and to foster, adoption, to orange pill others. I'm wondering what
world you're saying.
What's that?
The vintage world.
No, I just mean creating Bitcoin messages to spread the Bitcoin message, to spread adoption, just to pique curiosity in people's minds. But that leads me to my question of, at this point in your journey, like how do you approach spreading the message or orange pilling new people if they show interest and they're kind of noobs to the space? Like what angle or perspective do you usually use?
Question has a different answer depending on the point of time of how long you've been trying to orange pill people.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
My initial stance was, you fuck. I don't
know.
Yeah,
you can swear. You can
idiot.
Swear.
It's okay.
You fucking idiot. You buy Bitcoin and research it, and that didn't go over too well. My second thing was, I love you, so please listen to me. Buy fucking Bitcoin. That didn't work either. So I've gone from there to now. Everybody in my group or network knows me, in the normie world, as the Bitcoin guy, the crazy guy, crazy Bitcoin guy. So I don't proactively orange pill people or try to orange pill people anymore, because I don't think it ever works if they're not ready for it. So I wait for people to kind of open up a window to possibly talk about it, or if I talk about, like, if someone's struggling with something or they're anxious, I'm like, do you really know why that's happening? So I don't go right at it with Bitcoin. I'll say, it's happening because of inflation, and inflation happens. So I'm trying this route now. I get them to pay attention to me a little bit longer. I'm not sure if I've orange pilled people with this, but that's kind of where I am now.
I think
it's tough.
That's like a stage that a lot of us arrive at, is especially in like these social settings where, at first I remember just trying to like just vomit all the Bitcoin information I possibly could to everyone I could. And, immediately you see the eyes glaze over, of course. But the more I'm hearing the seasoned Bitcoiners and their stories, it's like you just start to wait for the other person to become more interested, and that's really the entry point.
Yeah, and from the point when you find that entry point, instead of trying to regurgitate all of the Bitcoin standard to them in the 5 minutes you have to talk to them. It's lowering your time preference and letting that process slowly.
I happen to have a copy of the Bitcoin standard, right?
Yeah, stop being high time preference. Like, what are you talking about?
Let me tell you about the Byzantine generals problem.
Right. Did you know the right? Exactly.
I think we're all probably. Go ahead.
I did have a question, unless you were going to take it somewhere, but I had a question about you mentioned before we started recording, there was a project you were filming or a documentary or something. I was curious about that.
We actually, we actually have a videographer on our team, and I said to her, can you do a documentary film? And she said, yeah, I've done many, whatever. So last year, a year from today, I asked her, can you video basically everything we do, the meetups, the festivals, everything we do, the conversations, the Zoom calls, everything, and create a documentary on the basically how a meetup starts with two people sitting in a bar, going to building the meetup's momentum, and then how we built it to a festival. So it culminates with the festival. It starts with two people at a meetup and ends with the Freedom Festival. And basically, we're trying to show people, we want to stimulate people to start meetups wherever they are. And this is a really hands-on version of actually what we did and how we did it. And it's not that hard. It just takes people and people going and spreading the word. I mean, we can have anything magical.
This brings up an interesting question to me. It's I've had this thought for a little bit of time. Like, do I want to start a meetup in my own area? And the thing that always comes at me, and I'm always like I have trepidation about it, is like I don't have the technical chops to start a meetup. Like I hate to admit this, I don't run a node. I barely got onto like a cold card, like barely by the skin of my teeth. So it's like, do you have any like I guess thoughts about how one might do that, or can anyone do that?
You talked about, I'm not technical at all either. I mean, if you can if you can do this podcast, you could do the technical thing for a meetup. I mean, what we suggest is you would start a meetup page, which, is like going onto any social media app. And that's kind of like the only technical thing you need to do. I mean, obviously, we have more of a business, so there's more technical to that. But to start a meetup, it's not that technically demanding. Or are you talking about something else?
Well, no, I'm just like, I'm thinking about that, what that would look like. Like, I'm just like posting on social media, hey, there's a meetup here in my local area if you want to come. And then I just see like myself showing up by myself.
And more importantly, if starting a meetup, and then if somebody asks you, how do I do this transaction from my node, using it at a more technical level, being able to answer those questions, or, being able to provide them the appropriate resources to discover that stuff on their own.
What mass adoption offers, so, we're offering, like, in other words, you could start a mass adoption meetup in your state, and we would support you. So we would help you with the branding, help you get the message out through our Twitter, through our social media accounts, and you just can call it a mass adoption, Dallas. I don't know where you're located, but so we can help support you. You can call it anything you want. It doesn't have to be mass adoption. We can help support you. And then you would just list your meetups on, you could use the Orange Pill app, which is a great app to connect with. So you got to find the places to sort of get your name out there. So it takes a little bit of work. Just like anything, as we know, proof of work. Sure. It takes work to create a vibrant meetup.
Where can people find this documentary, and when will it be available?
Thanks. So we just had a meeting about that this week, about how we're gonna distribute it. Probably we were gonna put it to a film festival and all this stuff, but we decided not to. So basically, it's just going to be on Twitter and YouTube right now, and then we're working on some other sort of partnership deals to kind of help distribute it. So I'm just going to post it on YouTube and Twitter.
Cool. The last question that I have before I let Mike ask any that he has left.
Awkwardly trip over the ending.
Yeah. I think all of us are in a similar situation, but this, we were kind of new to really understanding and digging deep into Bitcoin when the bull market kicked off a few years ago. So this is kind of the second bull market that we're entering. And this time I don't know if you want to use the word ready, but we're feeling like mentally prepared, kind of thinking about how we're going to handle the price run, how we're going to handle talking to our family, our friends, and helping people onboard onto Bitcoin. How are you thinking about this upcoming bull run, and what excites you about, the potential of the next year and a half, 2 years?
Well, as we know, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and I'm holding it. So it's not, it's obviously bull runs are great and fun and emotionally charges you, but it doesn't change anything in my life. So that being said, more and more people are coming to me in my group and kind of saying, what hardware wallet should I get? Or, I have a guy, one of my daughter's friends, he comes over every Wednesday now after he drops his kid off at school just to learn about Bitcoin. And this just happened. My handyman who works on my house, he is so excited to learn about Bitcoin and invest in Bitcoin. So it's happening more and more. And this was my handyman bought Bitcoin like a month ago when it was like going crazy from like 38 to 44. I forget, there was like a really good run for like 2 weeks. And he's like, that was exactly when he bought it. So he's like totally in. So I'm getting more and more people coming to me. So that excites me. And they're coming to me. And when they come to you, they actually listen as opposed to you coming to them. So that's exciting. And then I just think there'll be more positive energy in the space in a bull run. And so just Twitter's a happier place in a bull run, I think.
For sure. And for me, it's some people can't handle the bull market. Some people can't handle the bear markets. For me, it's just resisting the urge to sell. And I mean, I think it's fine if you have some Bitcoin and you take a small percentage off and just enjoy life or to buy a home or something, but resisting that urge to sell more than you absolutely need to.
Yeah. So I totally hear you. And I went from completely all in at the very beginning. I told my family, guys, we're on a Bitcoin standard. They had no idea what I'm talking about. I'm like, you do not buy anything you do not need to survive. Otherwise, and so I went from that, and, they think I'm crazy, to saying, nothing in life is guaranteed, and don't be so hard on yourself if you have to sell a little Bitcoin, to make your life. And that's actually, I think people should listen to that, because I was very hard on myself, and I put my family through, like, don't spend any money, because I didn't want to sell one Satoshi. And then, I just like, what's life all about? Who cares if you have this or that? I mean, it doesn't matter. You're lucky to have found Bitcoin and to be in Bitcoin in my life. So why don't you make your everyday experience better? So I'd say people shouldn't totally stress. I know, on Twitter, they'll persecute you if you sell a Satoshi. But in the real world, make your life livable and just be smart.
That's a wonderful message, and something that I personally struggle with all the time, to whether I should sell or not, or how I can afford not to sell or something like this. I'm wondering, like, how did you make that switch of like,
I have a progressive autoimmune disease. My health gets worse, monthly. And, and I was active and athletic and all that stuff in my healthier days. And I never thought about kind of the real important things in life. But once you lose stuff, you realize the value of every day just gets magnified when you get put in the position I'm in. So it's so precious to me and so valuable. Like, enjoy it. So, yeah, who cares if you have, I'm just making a number, you have 10 Bitcoin, but oh my God, you had to sell it. So now you only have 9.5. Where's it really going to matter? So each day, it's nothing's guaranteed. So enjoy each day and don't put that much pressure on you because, one day it's going to be over or you're not going to be healthy. So enjoy each day as long as you have it.
Should ask you before we wrap up, I should ask you if there's a particular aspect of Bitcoin that you've been thinking about recently or
the Bitcoin rabbit hole, the deeper you go down, the less you realize you actually know about it. So at this point in your journey, what's caught your eye and got you thinking more deeply and making you more interested these days?
Well, tangentially, I've been reading a lot and learning a lot about Nostr, which is not a new protocol, but it's not Bitcoin, but it's Bitcoin related. And I went on it today to try to spend some more time on it, and I just think it's like I think it's back in the day in like 2010, in Bitcoin where it's very difficult and takes a lot of time and understanding. It's very niche, but I have great faith. Bitcoin is freedom money. Nostr is freedom of speech. So I think it's that important. I think it's going to be that important. But I think that's a very exciting place. It's challenging. I'm not a techie, so it's a little techie for me right now. But I think it's as important for speech as Bitcoin is for money. So I'm excited about that.
Jeff, before we go, can you repeat kind of the where people can find you on Twitter, on YouTube, mass adoption, and what to look for, all that stuff?
Our website's massadoption.net. Our Twitter handle is, I don't know, Matt. BTC_mass is our Twitter handle. And YouTube is Mass Adoption. And also we're having another Freedom Festival May 4th of 2024. We have some great speakers. We have a Cattleman and Feast with Texas Slim, which was a great take last year. We have soccer tournaments. We have parkour demonstrations. We have Bitcoin workshops, food, speakers, Bitcoin rappers. So a lot of exciting stuff. So you can find information about that on massadoption.net.
Cool, man. That was cool.
Jeff, thanks for talking to us. Thanks for talking to us. Glad we could finally connect.
I thought I wasn't sure if I was in my old world a little bit, getting off on some tangents, but thank you.
No, this is a podcast about we're all about tangents. Okay. Well, I really enjoyed the conversation, whether it was a podcast or not. I enjoyed talking. Same. Awesome. Yeah, we'll keep in touch.
If you want to come to the Freedom Festival, hit me up and you'll be our guest.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking into that today, actually.
Okay. That sounds good. All right, I'll cut it up. Thanks again for listening to the High Hash Rate podcast. You can find us on Twitter at High Hash Rate, or you can hit up Dan at Heartland Bitcoin, HRTLND Bitcoin, or myself, Mike, at Rundance Bitcoin. That's all one word, Rundance Bitcoin. If you're a fellow pleb or you just want to shoot the shit with two high Bitcoiners, reach out to us.
Holy Toledo!